be only. I just added it right now.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. I would like to wholeheartedly welcome you to the India Turning the Tide COVID-19 Challenge, which is part of the MIT COVID-19 Challenge Hackathon series. As you can see, this is our 7th version. We have done 6 of them. I think the first one started back in March with the Ideathon. Most of these hackathons have been global in nature. We've done maybe like 2 regional ones, one focused on Africa, one focused on Latin America. And to be very honest with all of you, back in March, we all thought, we wouldn't have to do one for India because India was doing so well in terms of handling COVID-19. But as the restrictions have been lifted up, COVID is a disease that spares no one. So now we are really trying to get this hackathon going. My short introduction is, my name's Kushal Goyal. I'm part of the organizing team, really here to represent the entire team. We have 50, 60 volunteers who have really stayed up a lot of nights over the last couple of weeks. So I would request, if there are things that are not working as per the plan, be patient with us. We are really trying to help everyone get the most out of this hackathon. In terms of the flow today, I'm going to just quickly give you a 15-minute overview of the challenge of our previous hackathons. And then I'm going to turn it over to our keynote speaker, Mr. Sanjeev Mehta. That session will be followed by a deeper dive into our track. So our track leads will be giving you a high-level overview of what each track does. Then we have Freddie, who's the director of MIT Hacking Medicine. He's really the main think tank behind this series. So he will give us a 101 on hacking. I would emphasize hacking at MIT does not mean coding only. It means it's simply ideation, the process that we follow at MIT to scale up ideas to enterprises, right? So I just wanted to clarify that. And post the hack session, we would be joined by a past winning team in terms of vPool, who will share their personal experience, and then we'll close out with a few logistics slides at the end. So as I said, I'm not going to go through each one of these past challenges in detail, but it truly requires an ecosystem to pull off a hackathon. And what I mean by an ecosystem is, you need like-minded partners who want to, first of all, help you find the right problems, promote the event, pull in the right mentors, judges, and participants. But they also are critical post-hackathon, right, in terms of scaling these ideas to companies, connecting you to the right mentors. So I would say the hackathon today is just the beginning of the journey for a lot of the enterprises that will come out of this hackathon. And the job of this organizing team is really to play the role of matchmakers between the teams and the resources that are available across the ecosystem. So this is the Beat the Pandemic one. We did one on Africa. As you can see, the number of partners drastically changed, and also a lot of local partners teamed with us for the Africa event. And this was done in April, because one of the key component is each area has a different dynamics when it comes to COVID. So in order to stay true to the ground reality, we have really partnered with folks who have grassroots level connections on each of this hackathon. The only hackathon that was a bit different from all the other ones was the Datathon one. And this was a week-long hackathon that really focused on data analytics, and the teams were paired up with a mentor for that entire week, which is different from how we would operate today, where we would go through the hackathon in a 48-hour period, and you would tap into the mentor pool when you have questions, and they'll answer those questions, right? So that was different. Then we did a second one called Beat the Pandemic too, because the COVID-19 problems had shifted from like the initial surge to more around the spread, like how to flatten the curve, how do we reopen the economy. So as the COVID has shifted, so has like our hackathon design a bit. The Latin America one was the last one we did before this one. And at that time, there was a fear that, Latin America would become the next epicenter of COVID-19. And in certain aspects, that has been true, right? Like Brazil has a very high rate of prevalence. So I think the event was very well received, and a lot of teams are right now working on ideas that came out of the hackathon. So that brings me to today's hackathon. And I just want to take a moment and thank like all our partners, mentors, judges, media partners, most of all the organizing team and the participants who have taken the time and effort to join us for this challenge. As you can see, the partners really range right up from top from Niti Aayog, Atal Innovation Mission. So we would like to thank Mr. Amitabh Kant and Mr. Ramanan for their support. But we've also onboarded a lot of the big corporate houses in India in terms of Unilever, Flipkart, Sterlite Power, Zomato, and paired them with other, like more of a startup companies like today, Infinite Analytics. So we have been, I think there's only one filter criteria in terms of who we have partnered with. Anyone who really wants to make a difference in solving for the COVID-19 problems have been onboarded as partners. So we have 100 plus organizations. These organizations will stay as resources post the hackathon, and we are constantly onboarding more partners that will keep this journey going beyond the hackathon. In terms of representation, we got applications from 60 plus countries, 34 US states, 31 Indian states and territories, because even in our outreach, we wanted to make sure we don't ignore any part of India, because the realities for COVID are very different. And we are very happy with the application pool that has come in through the partner outreach. In terms of like the final selection, right? So in order to deliver a good hackathon, we are not able to accept each and every participant, even when we really want to. So we have really reduced the applicant pool to a manageable number. So we have a good ratio between participants and the mentor pool. So we have 300 plus mentors, we have 50 odd judges, 100 partners, and 1,500 applicants that have been accepted to participate in the hackathon. With that, I would really like to welcome Mr. Sanjeev Mehta. He is President, Unilever South Asia. He's Chair and Managing Director, Hindustan Unilever Limited. And he's also part of the Unilever executive team at a global level. I think there are a lot of credentials I can use for Mr. Mehta, but the one that I like the most is he's a proud dad of MIT alum. Like both of Mr. Mehta's daughters are at MIT, and he has been a strong champion and partner for MIT for a long time. So with that, Mr. Mehta, I would please like you to invite you to the stage, and I'll hand it over to you.
Hi, good morning, Boston, and good evening, India. Thank you, Kushal. Thank you, MIT, for inviting me to share my thoughts. MIT is an exceptional institution, and I believe that MIT and its alumni can have a massive positive impact on India. MIT, as Kushal rightly said, is very special for me. Our daughter Naina did undergrad at MIT, and our daughter Rashni is currently studying at MIT Sloan. So on this note, let me start and share my thoughts. The first question that often comes to mind is COVID-19 a black swan event? I do not agree with the school of thought that COVID-19 is a black swan, a singular unexpected event. It is the first in a series of what Tom Friedman rightly referred to as a herd of stampeding black elephants, multiple, predictable, economically catastrophic events. These are events which we know are coming, but as a society, we have been in denial. Professor Andrew Cunningham of the Zoological Society of London advised that the emergence and spread of COVID-19 was not only predictable, it was predicted. A 2007 study of the 2002-3 SARS outbreak published in the Clinical Microbiological Review concluded that the presence of a large reservoir of SARS-CoV-like viruses in horseshoe bats, together with the culture of eating exotic mammals, is a time bomb. Years of abuse and non-sustainable consumption has ravaged nature. The effects of climate change and loss of biodiversity have spurred a rise in zoonotic diseases, infections that come from animals. In fact, it was the UN Environment Chief Ian Anderson who had warned never before have so many opportunities existed for pathogens to pass from wild and domestic animals to people, and had explained that 75% of all emerging infectious diseases come from wildlife. What then are the other potential crises staring at us? The other potential crises stampeding towards us include, of course, the climate change, social and economic inequality, ocean and ecosystem collapse, water scarcity, amongst others. Social, economic, and environmental issues have existed prior to the pandemic, but they have now been pushed into stark focus. The world's richest 1% own 44% of the world's wealth, and at the same time, more than 700 million people go to bed hungry, live in extreme poverty. The environment continues to deteriorate, and even today, 1 in 3 people across the world do not have access to safe drinking water. As well as the direct economic impact, many of these issues could drive social instability, civil unrest, nationalism, debt and credit crisis, protectionism, geopolitical realignment, and even possible military conflict, further magnifying the economic consequences. The question would be, what is the likely impact on the global economy of this pandemic? Last month, the IMF projected global growth to contract by 4.9% this year. A partial recovery, they say, is expected to happen in 2021. The exceptional action taken by many countries, including the G20 through fiscal measures of about $11 trillion and massive central bank liquidity injections, could put perhaps a floor under the global economy. In reality, though, it is very difficult to project the impact of the virus on the economy, as many variables are still at play. The trajectory of virus in many parts of the world, including our own country, is still unknown. A second major wave could lead to further disruptions in economic activities. Uncertainty about when an effective vaccine would be found and then its availability and distribution. The effectiveness of governments' efforts to contain the economic impact and the consumers' and firms' reactions are still in the making and would depend on the longevity of the crisis. Many would like to believe that the world economy and India is clearly on the path to recession. Yes, the GDP growth rates would be in negative in many parts of the world this quarter and maybe for a couple of quarters. But the recession risk is real, but let us not take it as a foregone conclusion. Of course, many countries will be deeply affected by the economic scars of this crisis. Severe labor market dislocations are a major concern. Bankruptcies will also become more common. And the education of nearly 1 billion learners across 162 countries has been disrupted. The bottom line is that the pandemic is likely to increase poverty and inequality and painfully expose the weakness in health systems, the precariousness of work, and the challenging prospects for the young of accessing opportunities they desperately need. Now, what's the impact of this pandemic on the global trade? This has perhaps delivered the greatest shock to international trade since the Great Depression. Global trade in 2020 is projected to decline by 20% according to a baseline scenario for economic recovery. And it is not projected to regain its 2019 absolute level of $18 trillion until 2023. The crisis is exacerbating the deteriorating US-China trade relationship, putting more than $650 billion in annual two-way trade at risk. Amongst the possible shifts that could happen, the two-way trade between the US and China could shrink by as much as $100 billion. Similarly, EU trade in China could also decline by anywhere close to $20 to $30 billion. Companies will be compelled to revise their mix of products and the design of the global supply chains, and the governments that trade in economic policies to adapt to the shifts. This will be particularly true in segments such as medical equipment, pharmaceutical products, semiconductors, etc., which are particularly exposed to geopolitical factors. The crisis of this magnitude has also the potential to reshape the world order. In recent years, we have seen a trend away from globalization, with countries becoming more parochial. The COVID-19 crisis has already accelerated the trend towards nationalist policy. Global and regional partnerships are being put to test. Multilateral organizations like WHO have been marginalized. The question that you would perhaps pose to me, because I come from a consumer goods company, how is it impacting consumer behavior? Let me pick up a few discernible trends. First, of course, is COVID cocooning. Around the world, consumers are cocooning by retreating into their homes. This is mass behavior change on a scale never seen before. This is powering a fast-growing stay-at-home economy, home cooking, home entertainment, home exercise, and of course, working from home. The second is e-everything. Life in the times of COVID is increasingly a life lived online, where we are spending more time online, connecting, communicating, working, shopping, informing, educating, and entertaining ourselves. This is spurring a 3-year digital revolution in 3 to 5 months, with consumers adopting new e-habits at scale. The third is value seeking. In the face of uncertainty, fear, and anxiety, consumers are shifting to value-based shopping, and low unit price packs, or access packs as we call it, are likely to grow as recessionary times loom. The fourth is contactless culture. Consumers are shifting to a touch-free contactless culture as the human touch is temporarily feared rather than cherished. Beyond social distancing, social shielding, and self-isolation, we expect more consumers to avoid touching surfaces, materials, and even their own face. The fifth is clean living. Clean has become a cult in this era as consumers fetishize cleaning, cleansing, and clean living. Products and services offering effective cleaning, sanitizing, sterilizing, and disinfecting benefits succeed amongst germophobic consumers open to antibacterial, antiviral, antiseptic, and anti-dirt promises. The sixth is protective measures. Consumers are taking protective measures to prevent infection and safeguard and shield themselves from the threat, with safety first and risk-averse norms emerging. Physical health, boosting immunity, and in urban India, people are increasingly conscious about their mental well-being. The seventh is the fear factor. Consumers remain fearful for their lives, their livelihoods, and the way of life. Exacerbating the contagion of fear is an epidemic of disinformation that is spreading through social media. Fear is also now spreading to fear of the post-pandemic new normal, specifically in the context of financial security. Let me now summarize the width and depth of the situation. This is a crisis like no other. It is more complex, with interlinked shocks to health and economies that have brought a way of life to a near halt. Pandemics don't respect borders, neither do the economic shock they cause. At the beginning of the year, IMF was projecting that 160 economies will have positive growth this year. And now they are saying 170 countries will see income per capita go down. A banker argued in a recent economic analysis of the impacts of the pandemic and said, historic global crises like wars, revolutions, and pandemics often feel like they put history on fast forward. Processes that normally take decades or longer to play out unfold in a couple of weeks. Coronavirus is a political, economic, and psychological event of a lifetime that will drive disruption and transformation for years to come. It will bring a radical transformation of the kind that occurs only once in a generation. We must also not forget that several potential social, economic, and environmental crises which are stampeding towards us. While each event will have varying national, regional, and global impacts, collectively, we run the risk that it could become a real mega crisis. So what does this mean for our country, India? As far as the lives are concerned, we have lost a bit over 61,000 people, and over 3.3 million people have been infected. The daily new cases are at over 75,000. India's economic growth had slowed down even before the pandemic. The immediate impact of the national lockdown was severe supply chain constraints. From a demand perspective, the fear of loss of job, dwindling earnings, and eroding investments have made people very circumspect with their spends. The McKinsey-Oxford economic scenario suggests that India's GDP contract anywhere between -3 to -9% in the current year, depending on the effectiveness of the virus containment and economic policy responses. The slowdown in the wheels of the economy could potentially lead to a financial crisis. While some will be able to raise funding or latch on to the lifeline sent by the government, many businesses will stare at ruin. The impact will vary from sector to sector, with some seeing a relatively quick rebound, whereas many others will feel a sustained loss of output. There are several factors which have been impacted very adversely. For example, airlines, hotels, restaurants, tourism, real estate. These are also sectors which create a lot of employment. The fiscal cost of supporting them could be substantial, and the rising debt level could pose a big concern to the economy. However, at this stage in the crisis, I believe that the cost of not doing may turn out to be greater than the cost of support. Let me now reflect a bit on the journey that we as a country have been on in the last 7 decades. When India got its independence, our coffers were empty. We had no industrial base. The Industrial Revolution had bypassed us. The total GDP of the country, adjusted for today's prices, was less than the market capitalization of Hindustan Unilever today, the company I lead. We had muted growth of 3 to 3.5% in the first 4 decades, when the population was growing at 1.5 to 2%. The story has dramatically changed in the last 3 decades, when India has grown by an average of 6.5%, with the GDP reaching nearly $3 trillion. And for many years, we proudly wore the tag of one of the fastest growing economies in the world. When we look at $3 trillion, then our heart justifiably swells with pride because it makes us one of the top few economies in the world. However, the issue is with per capita GDP or income, which determines the quality of life for an average Indian. At just about $2,000, it remains a significant concern. We as a nation must dream big, think big, and act big. Let us dream of making India a $10 trillion economy in the next 10 to 12 years. This would lift the GDP per capita and take us to the middle income country status, but will necessitate that we cross the chasm of the 6 to 6.5% average growth that we have delivered in the past to our required and potential growth rate of 8 to 10%. This level of transformational growth for a decade and more will change India completely. We must also appreciate that this level of growth is required to gainfully engage the 10 to 11 million youth who join the workforce every year in our country. The mindset shift we need to do as a country is to promote, support, and applaud the entrepreneurs as job creators and drivers of economic growth. The trust chasm that exists must disappear. With this perspective, let me now share with you some of the key challenges we as a nation face to get your creative juices flowing. And I will also in the process suggest some steps we could and should take from a short-term and long-term perspective. First, of course, is protect people. As the economy opens, the risk of getting infected will also rise. The best way to contain this pandemic till a vaccine is developed is the time-tested public health principles of contact tracing, followed by testing and treatment, quarantine of suspect cases, and the sound public health hygiene practices, the cough etiquette, the use of masks, frequent hand washing with soap and water, or use of sanitizer, and physical distancing. One of the primary reasons of the hard lockdown we had in a country is the fragile nature of our healthcare. Money should now be diverted towards building healthcare infrastructure. We need to harness technology and make a quantum shift in reach, quality, and affordability of healthcare. Within the healthcare sector, we also have the pharmaceutical industry. Indian pharma is the third largest by volume and the 11th largest in value terms. The size of the industry is $41 billion with equal contribution from exports and domestic sales. This is an industry where the revenues could potentially cross $100 billion in the next decade and its global market share double to 7%. In the global COVID-19 crisis, the Indian pharma industry has been serving the country and the world with uninterrupted supplies of life-saving drugs. However, the COVID pandemic has exposed some serious structural challenges that the pharma industry faces, especially its over-dependence on imports for API, the active pharmaceutical ingredients, especially from China. The industry needs to move up the value chain by investing in the much-needed research and development. India, I believe, has a massive opportunity to become an affordable and quality healthcare capital of the world. The second, my suggestion would be make technology a game changer. This epidemic has accelerated the nation's digital journey and provided it the much needed acceleration. Many of our fellow citizens moved to online for the first time, whether to get news or to source essentials. City children had the first taste of online schooling and office goers adapted to working from home, leveraging remote collaboration tools. It moved us from a state of theoretical debate on whether it will work or not to real hands-on experience. We should leverage this momentum and make a fundamental shift in quality of education and healthcare in creating new business models, which in turn would create jobs, bring technology to management of agriculture and environment, in e-governance to bring efficiency and transparency, and assist in easing the pressure on big cities while bringing development across the country. As a nation, we can leapfrog and become world leaders in precision and advanced manufacturing, harnessing data analytics and AI for advanced scientific research and development in industry, agriculture, and environmental management. This entire area would in fact be playing to the strength of MIT educated folks. Just like Y2K at the start of this millennium gave a fillip to the Indian IT industry, the present crisis should be used to digitally connect the nation. This is a fabulous opportunity for the IT industry in the country to move up the value chain. India has the lowest cost of data in the world. We should use the low cost of data combined with the increased penetration of low-cost smartphones and use the massive amount of data that the nation generates for greater public good. Of course, we should protect privacy, but treat data as a national asset. The third important bit, we need to transform agriculture. About 50% of the country's workforce is dependent on agriculture, which contributes a meager 17 to 18% of the country's GDP. Small and marginal farmers in India with land holdings of less than 2 hectares account for about 85% of the Indian farming population. Various studies on agri and related value chain in India have indicated a loss ranging from 10 to 30% on account of poor post-harvest management, including deficient warehousing, insufficient cold chain, and lack of proper logistics and processing facilities. From farm gate to consumer, a horticulture product passes through 7 different intermediaries, and at every stage, there is a loss of 5 to 7%. India's yield in many products is 60 to 75% of the global best in class. 80% of the water consumption in India is used in agriculture, and this has been grossly mismanaged. We process a very small part of our production today, and processing of fruits and canning of vegetables can multiply their value 50 to 500 times. India has reached self-sufficiency in gross food grains, with production moving towards the 300 million tons mark. If we look at it from the lens of gross calories, our population on an average is now consuming about 2,225 calories per day, which is close to the recommended consumption, just about 5 to 10% less. The challenge is the quality of nutrition. We consume calories in an unbalanced manner with too much simple carbohydrates and not enough of complex carbohydrates and proteins. It is therefore not a surprise that as a nation, we are protein and micronutrient deficient. The pandemic has made us conscious about the benefits of immunity, and nutrition helps build immunity. Malnutrition has a huge impact on the society, as vitamin and mineral deficiencies impose a significant burden, both in terms of health costs, lost human capital, and reduced economic productivity. A small country like Netherlands is the second largest exporter of agriculture and horticulture products, whereas our share of trade is a measly 2.5%. We need to transform agriculture because of the number of people who depend on it for their livelihoods, the need to boost nutrition amongst the population, and also it's a fact that our cities do not have the infrastructure to cope with large-scale migration from rural India. Transformation will require extensive use of technology, building of infrastructure, sustainable agri practices, traceability from farm to fork, cluster approach, empowerment of farmer producers organization, and bringing in large organized players if we have to get into growing import substitute products like palm, for instance. India's aim should be to become the granary and breadbasket to the world. The government has recently taken the right steps by bringing in amendments to the Essential Commodities and Agriculture Products Marketing Committee Acts, which removes barriers to trade, investments, and competition. The fourth important bit is reinvigorate manufacturing. The challenge that we need to take on is how do we reinvigorate the manufacturing sector, including construction. These sectors have the potential to give the biggest lift to productivity and job growth. Importantly, India must position itself to be a bigger part of the global supply chain. We should focus on sectors where we have natural advantage or where we as a nation can create competitive advantage. Let me now take a few important things that we need to do in this area. First is reform the factors of production. India badly needs reforms in the areas of land, labor, and capital. We must unlock supply in land markets and reduce the cost by 20 to 25%. Create flexible labor markets, strengthen safety nets, and provide portable benefits to make labor more mobile. The cost of borrowing in India is higher than our peer countries by 400 to 500 bips. The biggest benefit could come out of reducing the credit intermediation in the banking system, where heavy bank borrowing by the government reduces the sources of capital available for the private sector, and the high non-performing assets in the banking sector increases their cost. Second is we need to increase the ease, but reduce the cost of doing business. Let me take an example. Logistics cost in the country as a percentage of GDP is estimated as 500 to 600 bits higher than other developed countries. While India has climbed up the ladder when it comes to ease of doing business, there's much more to do if we have to become one of the most attractive destinations for investments. The third important bit is that scale does matter. India will have to compete for an increased share of the global pie on cost, quality, service, and innovation. A recent McKinsey study indicates that India has got only 600 firms with annual revenues exceeding $500 million. It is very apparent that large firms not only help boost GDP and productivity, but they also act as catalysts for change, driving exports, invest in training, and pay higher wages. They're also nimbler and more innovative in adopting technologies. India's challenge is we have fewer large companies, and there is scope to close the gap in productivity and profitability when compared to peer group countries. It is not that India cannot do. Hindustan Unilever has the lowest cost and the highest return on capital employed as compared to any other large Unilever business in the world. The fourth important bit is to accelerate disinvestments. There are two imperatives for disinvesting government stake in business, in public sector enterprise. India's public sector enterprises are generally inefficient and will find it difficult to compete in an open globalized world. And secondly, the government will need money to kickstart and accelerate growth. The fifth important bit is preserving financial stability. Job losses, bankruptcies, and industry restructuring could pose significant challenges for the financial sector. The loan book of the banking industry is about 100 lakh crores rupees, and the total capital of all the banks is about 11 to 12% of the loan book. The banks in the last few years have been reeling under non-performing assets. If we now say that 5% of the loan books go bad, then the capital base of the banks will become very precarious. The NBFCs, or the non-banking financial companies as we call them, have been under severe crisis when one of the large NBFCs failed in India. As NBFCs struggled, the banks cut down on the exposure to this institution, further exacerbating the situation. Regulation and supervision should support the flexible use of capital and liquidity buffers in line with international standards, which in turn would facilitate the continued provision of credit to viable businesses. The monetary policy should remain accommodative, where output gaps are significant and inflation is below target, as has been the case in a country. In a country, we must be cognizant of strengthening and protecting the capital base of a financial institution, especially the public sector banks. A possible solution to resolve the issues of NPAs is establishing a bad bank, a separate legal entity where risk is transferred and which aggressively pursues recovery of NPA. Let me now dwell on a few issues which I believe are extremely important to the world of business and to the society at large. First is strengthen globalization. All of us need all of us and not some of us. The reality is that this crisis is neither a one country problem and nor can one country solve it. It will require the collective efforts of the world community. Collective action within the communities and internationally will enable a more rapid and peaceful exit from the crisis. In fact, if we cannot globally contain the spread of the pandemic, we may see a resurgence later. We have been unable to stop this global crisis because we have been unable to rally a global response. Hence, despite the divisiveness, the case for winning as one world is more important, more relevant and important than ever before. Despite the push back to multilateralism, India should play a proactive role in moving to a more collaborative world. This is also a great opportunity to reform institutions like WTO and UN. Restoring the efficacy of this institution means restoring the moral authority. Atmanirbhar Bharat, as the Prime Minister Modi has clarified, is not shutting down doors to the outside world or becoming protectionist in nature, but it is becoming a bigger and more important part of the global economy. The second is move to compassionate capitalism. It has rightly been said, the inherent vice of capitalism is the unequal sharing of blessings. The inherent virtue of socialism is the equal sharing of miseries. The virus has been a leveler when it comes to sharing of miseries. It does not differentiate between the rich and poor, between the urban and poor, between the developed and the developing world. However, the aftermath is much more severe on the poor, who risk losing their livelihoods, and the developing nations who will struggle with the meager resources. As Mahatma Gandhi said, the rich must live simply so that the poor can simply live. We must share the blessings of capitalism to take away the miseries of the society and collectively win. I'm a capitalist and firmly believe that it is the best way to allocate scarce resources. However, the current model of capitalism, with its one-dimensional focus on short-term shareholder value creation and winner takes all, will need to change. In fact, the history of business in India reflects the ethos of compassionate capitalism, and India should lead the way for others to emulate. The third is COVID-19 could potentially halt the progress on climate action. We should not be taken in by the initial drops in pollution and emissions due to lockdown or the clear skies over Mumbai, as there could be a severe bounce back on the environment as economies reboot. In our country, the impact of global warming is very pronounced. In the last 2 decades, 10 major floods hit India, causing economic damage of nearly $45 billion, killing thousands and affecting more than 370 million people. If India does not change the management of its water resources, we will have half the water we need in a few decades. The flashpoint is not far away. We should get away from procrastination and half measures and work together to flatten the climate curve, take concrete steps, excuse me, to better manage the water resources and keep plastic away from the environment. India could and should take a lead in renewable energy with the same passion as we undertook the electrification of villages. Fourth, leadership makes a difference. The coronavirus has been a test of character for millions of people around the world. To successfully navigate crisis, leaders must get comfortable with ambiguity and chaos, recognizing that there is no crisis playbook to guide them. Instead, they should commit themselves to navigating through the turbulence, adjusting, improvising, and redirecting as the situation changes and the new information emerges. The job of a leader is to provide brutal optimism, a clear account of the challenges ahead, but credible hope that collectively they have the strategy and resources to overcome the crisis. A good leader should also look beyond the immediate and plan for the long term. Leadership during this moment has potential to create a virtuous cycle of raising morale and growth in the society by lifting moods and spirits and channelizing the energies towards better performance, which in turn spurs the economy and saves jobs and lifts the society. Let me end by reiterating my belief in human ingenuity and a capacity to change. I believe that when humankind decide to change, there is virtually no limit to how fast or how dramatically we can do so. But first, we have to decide to change. This is about choice, not about our capacity to deliver. Each and every black elephant is fixable if we act in time. We have the technology, we can create the financial capacity, we have the intellect, the humanity, and a visceral instinct to survive. As Indians, we should embrace this crisis as an opportunity to craft a different and better future together. This is a moment that tests our humanity. It must be met with solidarity. Let us transform our country into a frontier economy, a country that is fairer, inclusive, and more equitable, greener and more sustainable, healthier and smarter, and very importantly, more adaptable and resilient. Thank you so much for listening to me. Over to you, Kushal and the team.
Thank you, Mr. Mehta, giving us food for thought for all our tracks, touching economy, healthcare. I think the participants would greatly benefit from that. I think we have time for maybe one or two questions. So if anyone would like to ask a questions, please enter it in the Q&A session, and I'll redirect those questions to Mr. Mehta. So, Mr. Mehta, one question is on the size and consolidation. Like, how would you think about entrepreneurs interacting with, larger corporate houses like Hindustan Unilever? Like, how does that ecosystem thrive by benefiting all?
Oh, absolutely. We cannot survive on our own. In our ecosystem, we have got thousands of suppliers. And there are many suppliers who have become multinationals in their own right on the strength of the business that they have got from us and the kind of knowledge and expertise that we devote to them. And I'm of the firm belief that knowledge is one aspect which does not dwindle when shared. And when we have this crisis, in our company, based on both our global learning and we have massive amount of expertise within the company, we had built a very robust system of how we would navigate through this crisis, helping all our supply chain partners, etc. And we also used the processes and protocols that we had developed to share with other industries through the trade associations. And I would be very happy to share any knowledge. If anyone reaches out to us, we would be more than happy to look at how do we share the knowledge that we possess. I think it's the duty of large corporations to help the ecosystem survive and thrive.
Great. We look forward to the partnership beyond the hackathon. So we'll take that task to connect the people who have questions. The one other area, Mr. Mehta, where we are getting a lot of questions is, what are your thoughts on, reviving or re-energizing the informal economy, and especially even for folks who have lost their jobs? Like,
I know.
How do we charge that back?
That's absolutely a very valid question, because the biggest impact that the country faced is on the informal sector. And if we look at today the measures that the government has taken, it is really at the two ends of the spectrum. Government has taken series of steps, whether it is enhancing the daily rate of Manrega or increasing the outlay on Manrega, the direct transfer of money that they have done, as well as the supply of free food grains to crores of families in the country. And even when we look at it from a lens of liquidity and providing, it has mainly been focused to the small and medium enterprise, not to the large enterprise. Yeah. While large enterprises have a crib, I would believe that with our meager limited resources, the focus on MSMEs are absolutely the right thing. The only way we will be able to kickstart and get the informal sector to start growing again is when we are able to ease the business. We have minimal, though the horizontal lockdowns have stopped, but the vertical lockdowns still keep happening, localized lockdowns. And we will have to be very disciplined in terms of what we need to do from personal hygiene, social etiquette, so that we can restart the economy and without the fear that we could be lashed with a second wave. I think the most critical aspect that still remains to be answered, which will also have a significant impact on the restart of the informal economy in the big way, is giving a fillip to demand. Unlike the US, which has put in trillions of dollars, unfortunately, India today cannot afford that kind of largesse. But at some stage, I believe the government will have to step in and stimulate demand, which in turn will start the virtuous cycle of the economy restarting again. That aspect still remains, and I think government perhaps would be waiting for the right opportunity to stimulate demand so that we can again have the economy start rebooting, start growing. And that would be so important for us to get the informal people back to their work and back to their livelihoods.
Great. So, Mr. Mehta, I would like to thank you on behalf of the team, but also all the participants. Thank you for taking time to talk with us, and more importantly, for partnering with us for the longer term. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I wish you all the best. Keep safe and come out with brilliant and bright ideas which can help our country grow and realize the potential and vision. God bless you all.
Thank you, Mr. Mehta. Moving on, I think I would like to introduce my colleague, co-conspirator, Rao Mantri, to take us through the rest of the agenda.
Thank you, Kushal. Thank you so much, Mr. Sanjeev Mehta, for sharing your perspective on India and how it is tackling the pandemic. Your words of wisdom for the participants, as well as for the organizing committee, is a great start as we begin this hackathon. I'd like to just briefly discuss the themes that we have actually selected for this hackathon. As we embarked on this hackathon, we collected insights from our partners and experts in India and came up with 4 pressing areas that became the main focus of this hackathon. The first one is focused on promoting effective and practical solutions to help the underserved populations. And within this theme, we have 2 tracks. I will not be discussing the details on the tracks because right after I finish, each of these track leaders will come and share their perspectives on the track, give you the context and some prompt questions that you can think about. Note that these are not the only questions that you are limited to. Let your imagination go wild on how you can actually solve problems in each of these tracks. The second track is reviving the informal economy, the importance of the informal economy, not only as a contributor to the overall GDP and economy of India, but also for the livelihoods, healthcare, nutrition of workforce in India is a big challenge. And especially how do you actually revive this while mitigating the spread of infection and helping transition back to normalcy is the theme of this theme. And again, there are 2 specific tracks in this particular theme, and you will hear more details in a minute or 2. Obviously, the COVID-19 is a big healthcare problem, and we have actually 4 tracks in this theme, and it covers a broad range of challenges in healthcare, in improving care, strengthening coordination within the ecosystems. An important factor is how do we actually establish safety and well-being of frontline workers and healthcare practitioners. We felt it was an important track to actually look at innovative ideas to help those people who are in the front line. And the 4th track is really about the mental health support that many of the populations are facing under this COVID conditions. The last theme is really on the combating misinformation and fraud. How do we highlight and communicate what information that is scientifically accurate? And also, how do we combat poor quality and fraud during this pandemic? So those are the 10 tracks that you will hear about from the track leaders. So I would like to invite each track leader to come and present their perspectives. The first track is is going to be discussed by Prashant Prasanna, who is also a colleague of mine from MIT. Prashant.
Hello, everyone. Congratulations and welcome to this COVID hackathon. It's really heartening to see so many people coming across from around the world to solve such tough humanitarian, societal, and economic challenges facing India in the light of the COVID pandemic. So as Rao mentioned, I'm the track lead for this particular track, which is focusing on marginalized community and really helping them support or cope with the pandemic, right? So if you look at migrant workers, they're actually one of the marginalized communities you could consider as part of this track. There are 139 million migrant workers in India, and they're facing severe health issues, threatening of their livelihood and the health of their families and children. There's, because of the loss of jobs, there's been a lot of displaced families. There has been a lot of migration away from cities and away from economic centers. And as a result, there's been a lot of increased risk of contracting COVID because of the migration. So this track was really put together to help you all think and come up with solutions to address and bolster these communities to better fight the pandemic and come out stronger on the other side. So we're inviting folks to think along the questions that are on the screen, but also broadly think about private and public partnerships, think about developing policies or innovations to help mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on marginalized communities so that they can improve their own resiliency as a community and they can bounce back stronger than ever. So thank you, and I look forward to seeing you all in the track.
Thank you, Prashant. Next up is Aishwarya Chandar, who is in India. So Aishwarya.
Hello everyone, I'm Aishwarya Chandar and I'm in the hack team, and I, along with Kriti Subramaniam, are the co-leads for Track B, delivering access to quality education in rural and semi-urban areas in the times of the pandemic. We are so pumped by the overwhelming response that we received from you, and we cannot wait to see the kind of solutions that you come up with over the weekend. Our track is focused on delivering access to quality education in rural and semi-urban areas in the times of the pandemic. Education is a pivotal resource that is currently dwindling in the wake of the pandemic. We believe that access to education can not only reform an individual at the grassroots level, but also motivate them to become a constructive member of this newly changing world. As we all know, around the world, we are being forced to develop new models of teaching to facilitate continued education to students from a range of backgrounds and develop resources that allow learning to take place efficiently from home. Opportunities for effective at-home learning are accessible mostly to those who have access to technology, computers, and uninterrupted internet service, all of which are demographically limited in India. For many students, this type of learning was difficult to begin with even before the pandemic took root. Participants in this track may consider how we can enable the delivery of high-quality education to children from communities where technological resources are scarce. How do we reinvent educational milestones for this type of learning and create ways to track progress remotely? How can we support not only academic growth, but also social and emotional growth of children who are often in compromising situations? How do we engage the 492 million count of students who are currently deprived of their regular schedules? How do we provide basic benefits to students such as shelter and meals that were originally being taken care of by educational institutions? Additionally, at times like these, community-driven initiatives and volunteering have seen to dramatically impact the quality of education accessible to students from underprivileged origins. How do we as a community support those who are trying to volunteer and educate students during the pandemic in a safe and health-conscious manner? Can we encourage the engagement of volunteers outside of traditional educational institutions? How do we motivate communities to prioritize education over immediate livelihood? How do we think about transitioning educational structures to these new systems and back to some semblance of normalcy post-COVID-19? Most importantly, how can we maintain these reforms consistently through a nation as diverse as India in a standardized manner. We look forward to interacting with you guys this weekend and to look into the kind of solutions that you come up with. All the very best to all the participants, and we hope you have a fantastic time over the next 48 hours. Thank you.
Thank you, Aishwarya. Puneet Jain is next up.
Hello. Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Puneet. I'm from India. I represent a startup called Incubate in India. So I'm leading the track C, which is all about the addressing the key challenges faced by micro, small, and medium enterprises. So the MSMEs are going through different and difficult situation in India and worldwide. And this is the time for us to get some innovative ideas and that can be incorporated in in our economy. So basically there are 4 points that we focused on, like how can we assist the displaced informal sectors workers locally while ensuring their safe return to work. How can MSMEs that require physical labor adhere to social distancing norm while continuing productions? And the second point is what innovative solutions, including digitization, e-commerce, etc., can be developed to enable MSMEs to be more resilient and self-sufficient. And the third point, what are the some ways in which we can reinforce financial regulation for the informal workforce as both long-term and the short-term solutions. And the fourth one is how can we identify and support industries that have been most impacted by the pandemic, such as agriculture sector. So if you have any questions regarding any point, you can reach out to me anytime. I'll be available 24/7. So I'm just leading Traxi with my partners, Dana and Ram. Thank you.
Thanks, Puneet. I think one important point to stress is that these are just prompt questions and you're not limited to only these questions. Understanding the overall context is important as you get ready for the problem picking. So next
Sure.
up is Shakti Singh Shekhawat.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I officially welcome you on behalf of Incubate India as well to the MIT COVID-19 challenges. So it's a great honor to be here as well, and it's to see the numbers, to see the excitement in the channel Slack. It's a great honor. So I am representing Track D, so which eventually says best utilization of government and private funds to reactive informal economy, which basically looks forward to the daily wage workers. So what we are looking forward from the past 4 to 5 months of this pandemic, COVID-19 has hit us all, but not in the same manner it has done to the 350 million, approx wage workers and the small business owners in India. So you might all have heard about a series of newses over past 4 or 5 months, wherein wage workers are traveling from here to there from all parts of the country in search of work, in terms of earning daily wages, in terms of food. So there are several CSRs benefits that have been launched by the Indian government to provide access to resources like daily need packages, even food supplies at the very end. But I just wanted to put it up front to you. But do you feel that the promises that have been made are fulfilled? So no one amongst us are aware of the same. So why not we create flexible solutions to make the process transparent and visible to all? So I would just, these are some of the, brief that are on your screens. So these are some, you can think broader, think in more innovative way, how you can contribute to the community. So how can you make the process transparent? So there are, if I'm promising you something and something is being done or not, how can we make this transparent by both, the target groups and the government itself? Also, how can we make resources available to the end groups, the logistically as well as informatically? So if some government scheme is launched and you might be aware of it. Some people, some person in other country or any part of the country is not aware. How can we make these processes easier? So I would love to invite you all who can think about solutions like this to my track, and we would look forward to have you with us. Thank you everyone.
Thank you, Shakti. I think the participants on the tracks are decided. So those folks who are in track D will be working with Shakti. Now moving on to the healthcare theme, I would like to invite Aditi Shankar to talk about track E.
Thanks, Rao, and welcome everyone to the hackathon. It's an exciting weekend that we're looking ahead of us. So track E is about developing new ways to deliver care in a COVID-19 and post-COVID-19 world. So the operative idea here is to really reshape the healthcare delivery system, right? So with COVID-19 coming in, clearly the healthcare systems were not having sufficient capacity to deal with COVID-19 patients. And what was also happening was your non-COVID patients were also suffering, right? So clearly there's a whole bunch of, a whole lot of healthcare burden that the system is currently facing. So how would we deal with it in case another pandemic comes, right? So how do we really reshape the way we deliver care? And there are 2-3 different areas to think about. Again, as Rao mentioned, you don't have to be limited to these prompts, but to kind of get you started, thinking about how to strengthen the existing primary healthcare system, which really drives around people being more proactive towards their care and taking their care, more seriously than they would otherwise. The second piece is around really going very virtual, right? So what can be some innovative ways to bring about, to adopt technology in the current healthcare delivery value chain? And the third piece is, again, around coordination of information to drive better healthcare related interventions. So these are, again, just general prompts for you. And we'll be starting the problem pitch session soon. So feel free to ask any questions that you have on the channel, or obviously you can feel free to ping me as well. And looking forward to working with some of you over the weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, Aditi. Staying on the healthcare track is Matthew Samuel, who will come and explain the goals of this track, which is about improving the coordination in the ecosystem.
Thanks, Rao. Hi, everyone. Thanks once again for joining us. My name is Matthew, and I'll be your track lead this weekend for track F, strengthening coordination across healthcare institutions, both public and private, to build a robust ecosystem. For brief context, as you all know, with more than 1.3 billion people in less than a decade, India is slated to be the world's most populous country. As Mr. Mehta mentioned earlier, India is on the cusp of a digital revolution across a number of sectors. This could be a huge boon for AI, and we're starting to see a number of tech companies build on this foundation of data and invest accordingly. In health, a majority don't have EHRs, and among those that do, there's a lack of standardization across hospitals. But just last week, we saw the launch of the National Digital Health Mission, which is open for public comment, which seems to lay a promising foundation from a regulatory perspective on how we might move forward. When we think about the future promise of AI, I think it's important to remember that before you can run, you walk. And before you can walk, you crawl. So if we look at the number of initial ventures that are no longer around, I think some of the failures that we've seen has come from a rush to run without laying these proper foundations. This brings us to the focus of our track in emphasizing that it's important to leverage this data to move forward with the fundamental shift in mindset to one of collaboration. As mentioned earlier, increased knowledge and the advancements of science benefits everyone. Unfortunately, we've learned the hard way through various controversies such as Sergosphere and hydroxychloroquine that in the absence of open data and open research for us to collaborate together, there can be challenges. Moving to our description, as mentioned, there's significant information asymmetry and a lack of communication across the healthcare sector. This provides a pressing and time-sensitive need to optimize this process. We listed a few questions here for you all to think about, including how to empower a robust ecosystem, how to track the availability of critical resources such as beds, how might we plan for surge capacity, and finally, how better can we coordinate care. Martina, Vikas, and I look forward to supporting you this weekend, and we're excited to see all that you come up with. Thanks.
All right, now I have the pleasure and I'm honored to present Track J. So we are about to ensure the safety and the well-being of the frontline workforce and healthcare practitioners. And as you can see, I'm not Indian, but I'm French, German. I'm super excited to learn about what are the problems that we are facing in India and to solve them. And this weekend, along with Eric Young, Arshana Balan, and Vaishali Sundaresan, we are going to help you to solve these problems. So how do we actually remove the stigma around healthcare frontline workers? How do we help them mentally? How do we empower them and not make them weak in front of this COVID situation? How do we manage allocated resource and distribution among the various rank of the frontline workforce? So we have a lot of problems around all this healthcare workforce, and we want to find solution. And for that, we have this amazing environment of people from all around the world. We have expert mentors, all the help you need, that you just need to bring ideas together to combine them to make it a powerful innovation. So I'm super, super excited to help you, and hopefully we can innovate together and make ideas successful and implemented. Good luck, everyone, and see you soon in our track and pitch session.
Thank you, Michael. The last track in the healthcare is on the mental health. Anuj Sharma.
Hello everyone, my name is Anuj Sharma and I represent Incubate India from India basically. It's a startup and I am the track lead for track H. Yeah. So I won't waste much time. I'll just come to the main point. We have mental issues because of few reasons. That's fear, worry, stress and overthinking, which leads to many problems. Depression, anxiety, and so it's normal and understandable that people are experiencing fear in context of COVID-19 pandemic. And there are more and more of us who have already done a major change in our daily lifestyle, working from home, online classes, studying, and many changes, XYZ. And faced with the new realities of working from home and temporary unemployment, it's a bit stressful for the people who were laid off from their jobs, the freshers who are starting out in their career right now. So it's important that we look after our mental as well as the physical health. And I guess if you have gone through the previous reports, you might know that the first and foremost reason for India to lose its mental health is the lack of awareness and sensitivity about the issue. It's a big stigma around here, and people are suffering from any mental issues. So people just tag them that they are lunatics or mad or idiots. So we have given you 4 basic points through which you can start your creativity, you can start your innovation. So basically these 4 points will give you a spark. So I'll just go through the 4 points. It is how can we increase awareness of potential mental health issues, coping mechanism and treating options? As I mentioned before, the main reason why India is on the number 1, it was said by WHO, because there's no awareness about the mental issues, health issues, and how to cope with it. How can we provide frontline workforce access to mental health resources while keeping in mind their extensive work hours and alienating circumstances? How can we remove the stigma of accessing mental health resources? I previously said the same. What are some ways in which we can increase access to available self-help and resources among the affected population? So here are a few points through which you can start your creativity, you can start your innovation, and you can just trigger the points and go on and innovate something big. So just don't limit yourself to these 4 points. Think vast. This is just the spark. Like I can just say this is just a spark for this problem, and there are many ideas which can be solved, many problems which can be solved, and there are many ideas which can be implemented. So that's it from my side. And if you have any queries, I'm available for the next 48 hours on the Slack channel. You can just ping me anytime. Thank you.
Thank you, Anuj. We move to the last theme. I would like to invite Olympia Estela Caceres Brown to talk about her track. Olympia?
Hi, yes, I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I am Olympia Estela Cáceres Brown. I am proud to be here with you in another challenge for the COVID-19. Our track I is supported by Dana, Mook, Devendra, and Nitya. Um, I am in the United States, but I am from Honduras, Central America. But the news are very important. The communication is very important, and that's our track. It's about highlighting the communication of the information that we provide to um, the community in India and in the world. Um, India is one of the most important mode of communication that it has is the telecommunications. It's the largest network in Asia. As you all know, the phones, the cellular phones and all that um, landlines are amazing, has increased in the many years since 1950, and it reached almost 50 millions in subscribers in 2004, according to the Economic Discussion website. So communication is very important, and I am here to help you. We prompt a couple of questions on the slide that you can read it at your own pace. I don't want to read it to you. I am just here with my team to help you to develop and find innovative solutions to communicate to the community what is accurate, what is safe, to improve the lives of everybody in not only India, but in the world. So I will be around, Slack us in track I, and hopefully we will find a better solution that we are using now. Thank you.
Thank you, Olympia. We'll move to the last track, track J. Anuj Tyagi will share the context and some prompt questions on this track. Anuj?
Yep. Hello, everyone. Welcome to MIT COVID India Hackathon. A real pleasure and honor to be with you all. So I'm one of the peer with Rao and Kushal. So the track, we have this outline for you is around quality control and fraud. We know that the pandemic has created new patterns everywhere. The consumer behavior is changing. The demand for healthcare supplies, essential supplies, e-services, it's just exploding at a rate like nobody could imagine. So the ecosystem is not there yet. And the amount of stress, the demand and the patterns are putting on the ecosystem is exposing the cracks and bottlenecks, along the way. And unfortunately, there are some bad elements who are exploiting these cracks. So when we talk about fraud or misinformation, whether it's in sales and distribution area like price gouging, damage, good delivery, counterfeit stuff like that, or it's like the fake websites delivering promising things which like they will never deliver, right? And then all the things around fraud and other things. So there's some questions outlined here. This is just to kind of prod your thought. I won't go over these questions. I want to keep the thinking and the horizon a little bit broad. So the goal for this track would be to take on some of those challenges, and I would say take on those bad elements and help society to fight them. So I'm looking forward to what this group can come up with. Really excited to be part with such an amazing, diverse and motivated group of people. So I'm here with track J, and I'm accompanied by Prakash and Rupesh. So reach out to us for any help for the next 48 hours. Thank you.
Thank you, Anuj. So that concludes the discussion around the tracks. It is now my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Freddie Gwen. He's Arnoldo Beckman postdoc fellow at MIT and a resident physician. He's a physician, scientist, innovator. He's also a co-director of MIT Hacking Medicine. He's really a guru of hackathons. We're very lucky to have him here. And as Kushal mentioned us earlier, this event would not have been possible without Freddie. I'm sure you'll find the discussion he has for you very enlightening. So Freddie, it's all yours.
Thanks, Ra, for that kind introduction. And it's really a pleasure to be here. As Ra mentioned, I've been part of MIT Hacking Medicine, which is a volunteer-based group at MIT for the last 2 years, and have been co-directors for a couple of years, but no longer co-director, and have been helping launch this MIT COVID-19 challenge. And MIT Hacking Medicine has been around for close to 10 years now, having done hundreds of hackathons in person all across the globe as well. Let's see here. So what sets us apart at MIT? And it's really in 4 different categories. One is the hackathons that you're going to be experiencing this weekend is a little bit different from perhaps a traditional hackathon that you're used to seeing, where there's a lot of coding and programming being done. Here, we really strive for a very diverse set of people to come together to solve these problems. Basically, think about every single stakeholder that is involved in that problem, and that's who we want at the table. So we bring together clinicians, scientists, engineers, programmers, coders, user designers, patients, payers, business, finance, again, just every single sector that you can think that touches on the healthcare industry that would be coming as part of these challenges. The second is the design methodology process, to really, again, focus on the problems that are coming from real people. I know everyone is anxious today to really jump straight into developing the solution, but really want to challenge all of you to really spend some time tonight to really focus on defining what is that problem, and defining it to a level that's so detailed in terms of, who are the stakeholders, who are the people involved, what part of the problem are you trying to solve? And we'll get on a little bit more into detail that's a little bit later. But that's what you should be focusing first initially, because if you haven't defined the problem, you won't be able to build a appropriate or a good solution to solve that problem. The viability part of it is that we want these solutions to get implemented. We always say, going from ideation to impact. And so you have to think about the feasibility and the viability of these solutions from the perspective of not just from a financial model and how it's going to be self-sustaining in terms of paying for itself moving forward, but in terms of how does it fit into the infrastructure that it's meant to innovate in? Does it take into account some of those constraints that are in place? In terms of, for example, if you're going to develop a solution for the operating room, but it's going to add, double the amount of time in terms of the operating room time, that's unlikely to be a solution that's going to get implemented because you're now coming at another cost as part of that. And then the fourth part is the community. As much as we would like every single solution that comes out of all these events to be completely successful and to end up being developed and having meaningful impact, it's just not the nature of how these events go. And so we hope that through this process, not only do you now have the skill set to learn how to go through this process of solving problems, but now have plugged into a community of like-minded individuals from all sectors of healthcare and beyond to solve those problems jointly, so that maybe in a month from now or 2 months from now, if you're not still working on the idea that you're developing this weekend, you can, and you get struck by a new problem to solve on, you'll have the passion and now the skill set and the community to go and tackle those problems. And so for us, hacking at MIT isn't about gaining unauthorized access or breaking into computer systems, but it's really about a creative application of ingenuity. And really, for us, there's 4 reasons, again, that our hackathons are very different from other hackathons. There's no need to code. It's a highly interdisciplinary process, and this is both at the participant level as well as the mentors that we bring in throughout the weekend and on the judging panels as well. Again, a very problem-centric aspect of these hackathons, and really focusing on meeting real user needs. And again, the feasibility and the viability of the solutions are equally important as well. So what does an MIT hackathon look like? It used to be look like this, where we'd have hundreds of people coming together into a single place to do our hackathons. And of course, now they look more like this, a bunch of Zoom rooms that you'll be experiencing throughout the weekend and across Slack as well. So the hackathon usually occurs over a weekend, starts on a Friday evening, goes into Sunday afternoon, and goes through these different stages of pitching, mixing, hacking, getting feedback, iterating, and finally presenting. So in the pitching, this is really what we're referring to as the problem pitching for this evening. And there, we want you to only pitch the problem. Do not talk at all about the solution or what the potential solutions might be. This is really purely about what's the problem that you are passionate about and that you want to work on. Everyone will get 45 seconds to pitch. You can pitch multiple times, or if you have multiple problems you would like to pitch. And then after that problem pitching session, you'll get to see what everyone is passionate about, and you'll start mixing. And so there'll be different Slack channels set up that correspond to problem pitches, numbers, and then you can just enter into those Slack channels and start having a conversation with the people who pitch those problems and start to form teams. And the team formation will also happen tonight into early morning tomorrow at the latest. Now, the rest of the weekend is mostly what we call the hacking period. And this is where you'll go through and drill further down on that problem definition, on the market landscape research, trying to figure out how do you build a unique and innovative solution, to doing some potentially customer discovery, and then finally going into actually developing the solution, prototyping if you're able to, or wireframing, and definitely working out the concepts as part of that. And as I mentioned, throughout the weekend, you'll get a lot of feedback from the 300 plus mentors that we've gathered for this weekend. And they come from, again, all sorts of backgrounds. So I would highly encourage you guys to make full advantage of that as you work throughout this weekend. And of course, the most important thing is to keep iterating on this process. Keep building out your solution, test it with a few people or a few mentors, incorporate the feedback that you get from them, and continue to improve and make this solution even better. And then lastly, the presentation will be on Sunday afternoon. And there you'll have 3 minutes to pitch your final presentation, which should cover the problem space, the innovative solution itself, the implementation timeline, and execution plan for what you plan to do after the hackathon. And then you'll get 2 minutes of Q&A from the judges. So what are some hack do's and don'ts? For this to really be an open environment, we really want everybody to open themselves up to crazy ideas. Don't be the naysayer in the room. Don't shoot down ideas before they've had even a chance to be fleshed out or been discussed. Leave your job titles at the door. Here we're on all equal level playing field at this point. We're all here to commonly solve these problems. Seek diverse teams. Don't just have a bunch of engineers on one team. Really seek out all those diverse backgrounds that I mentioned earlier to be on your team. The more diversity on your teams, the better it will be, because you'll start taking into account all those different perspectives. Next is to reach out for help. As I mentioned, there'll be lots of mentors there. Of course, we have a large organizing team of, I think, 40 to 50 people involved as well. So we're also happy to help you where we can as well. But don't be afraid to reach out for help, especially in a short amount of time when you only have 48 hours between now and when you have to present. Don't be shy about that process. Next is fail fast and often. So really iterate and pivot. And this is what I mean. Give some due diligence as you're evaluating potential solutions and building out your ideas. But if you're hitting that wall a little bit too often, just go ahead and move on and find the next best solution that will help solve that problem. Again, make sure you're really focused on the problem and solving that problem. Don't get too enamored by, oh, here's a new piece of cool technology, or here's a new functionality I'm going to build out of this app or whatnot. Really make sure that you're focusing on the needs of the problem and that the solution you're building is really going to address that. Then lastly is to build something. And here, when we say build something, it's really be really active in the process. Don't just sit in the room and have these conversations and just talk and then draw out ideas. If it's an app, then go ahead and build the app if you can. If you can't prototype something, make sure you go out and do customer discovery. with your ideas. You know, have some active component where you're testing and validating your concepts and your ideas with others. And then some hack don'ts is, of course, at this point, don't worry about patenting because it's way too early in the process. And usually there's not enough being built out of a single weekend that would be feasible for patents. Also, don't discuss ownership at this point. Again, too early in the process because, you know, ownership of a zero idea is also zero. So don't develop too broad of a solution. Really focus on, once you've got that well-defined problem, to make sure that the solution you're developing really tackles that single problem. Think about essentially an MVP, right? It's always nice to say, oh yeah, I can add on this feature or that feature or that functionality, but at the end of it, it may completely muddle the effectiveness of the solution. Next is don't be negative in your conversations with the rest of your team members. Really help support the rest of your team. Don't be shy, really get everybody engaged throughout the entire time as possible. I know it's a little bit harder for some of us versus others, but if you notice that on your team, really bring those people out of the shell. And of course, don't monopolize the conversation. And of course, as I mentioned, don't just talk, really take some action. Try things out and test and validate your ideas. And so a good hack is based on a good story that meets a real need that can be iterated and tested and scaled. And so the hackathon process will be, as I mentioned, identifying the problem, breaking that problem down into the sub-problems so that you really get at the crux of that problem, starting to brainstorm for solutions around that problem, and then continuing to iterate and improve over this process throughout the weekend. But as Albert Einstein once said, if I only had 1 hour to save the world, I would spend 55 minutes defining a problem and only 5 minutes finding the solution. So this really tells you how much emphasis that we are putting on making sure that you have a well-defined problem before you even start on the solution development itself. And a well-defined problem is basically a clear or concise statement that describes the pain point of the problem, and really in quantifiable terms, so that way when you develop your solution and you intervene on this pain point, you now have an outcomes or a way to measure the impact of your solution. It needs to be a statement that enables people to readily grasp and understand what you're trying to accomplish. So be able to communicate the importance and the impact of the problem you're trying to solve, not just to the experts in the field, but to the layperson, is very important. The judging panel, some of them may be complete experts in what you're trying to work on. Some of them can be completely outside of that field as well. And we usually try to ensure that the judging panels are roughly 50-50 split along those lines. And so lastly, it serves as a great communication tool to help get buy-in and support from others. Usually I'd like to break up how we define problems into the 5 W's: the who, the what, the when, the where, and the why. You know, who does this problem affect? Who are the stakeholders? Who are the customers involved? Who's the primary end user? Who's going to be the payer for the solution? What is the actual problem? What would happen if the problem doesn't get solved? What happens if the problem does get solved? Really getting a better understanding of the quantification of the problem. When does the problem occur? And that can be interpreted in terms of, you know, when in the disease cycle does this happen? When does this happen in terms of time of the day? Or, but where in the timeline of the problem development, essentially, is it best to intervene and fix that problem? And then where does this problem occur? Does it happen in the home? Does it happen in the hospital? Does it happen at the schools? You know, that location is really important as well. Or does it happen in India or certain, you know, northern India versus southern India? How is the infrastructure and the local ecosystem different as part of that? And again, why is it important to fix this problem? Really hitting on, you know, what would be the impact essentially if you were to solve this problem. We also talk about the main stakeholders that are involved. And really here, every problem is going to usually have multiple stakeholders, but you really need to think about how to pick the primary stakeholders that you're going to be developing the solution for. You can take the same problem and try to pick, for example, a solution that will be for the patient versus the provider. It's going to end up being two very different solutions in terms of what you're developing. So it's going to be really important for you to identify who that primary stakeholder is or primary end user of that solution going to be. But roughly, the main stakeholders that we usually identify with is the patients, the providers, the payers, the industry or pharma, and then the patient's circle of trust, their family or their caregivers. And so a few more lasting thoughts is be very quantitative as you define this problem. Again, you want to be able to define it well enough so that when your solution is being implemented or tested and validated, you can point and say, aha, we decreased the amount of hospital length stays, or we improved the diagnostic rate of this disease. Pick a very specific customer or end user, as I mentioned, picking that primary stakeholder. Building a persona, and here what we mean is, building that story so that people can easily relate to the problem, especially people who are not directly knowledgeable about the problem itself. And lastly, don't confuse who the end user is, who's the person paying for it, or who the person is prescribing the solution for as part of this. Healthcare is definitely a much more complex ecosystem than otherwise. So just a reminder, the 4 steps to identify the problem, break it down, build it up, and make it better. And so just to give you a little bit in a preview of what you'll be doing at the end of this session, which will be in the problem pitching. As part of problem pitching, you'll have 45 seconds to pitch those problems. And anybody can pitch. We encourage as many people to pitch problems as they can. Even if it's a problem that's already been pitched, if you have a different spin on it or a different perspective on that problem, we encourage you to pitch it as well. If you have multiple problems that you want to pitch, you're certainly welcome to do that as well. Once everybody's had a chance to pitch their problems, you'll be assigned a pitch number correlating to that problem. There'll be a Google Sheet that will be shared where you can see all of that being written down. And then there are Slack channels already created with those pitch numbers for your respective tracks. So if you pitch, for example, pitch number 5, you'll go into team A005, for example, if you're in track A. And then others who want to further discuss with you about the problem you pitch will go into that Slack channel. You guys can open up the video option in this Slack channel, or you can just talk within the Slack or Zoom or whatnot. But really form teams around the problem and the unmet need. Try not to just form a team around, oh, these are just my friends that I want to work with. Really use this weekend to broaden your horizon. We'll send out links for team registrations. Those will be done by Saturday morning. But really, again, seek different backgrounds, different from you on those teams. Try to aim for 5 to 7 people per team, but there is a very hard cap of no more than 7 people on your team. And if you're getting into 8 or 9 people and you're wondering if you're going to come to ask us if you can stay as a team, we're going to tell you no. We would encourage you to then split into 2 teams and either try to tackle the same problem from 2 different angles and try to develop 2 different solutions. Or most likely the problem that you come together on, you haven't broken it down far enough, and you may actually end up working on 2 different facets of the same problem or 2 sub-problems of that larger problem. And to just give you a perspective of what the judging criteria will be on Sunday, this is equally weighed between the impact, innovation, implementation, and presentation. So impact really gets at the problem space. How well have you defined that problem? How impactful is that problem? And who is affected by that problem? In terms of the innovation, this is really how is unique or innovative is the solution you're bringing to the table? How different is it from what's currently existing? And really convincing us as to why this would actually solve the problem. So again, if you've been able to actually build something and test it and validate it and put it in front of some of the potential end users or customers and provide some of that feedback, I think that's where this gives us more belief or credibility in terms of the traction of your ideas. The third part is the implementation slash, we sometimes also call this potentially the business plan, but really here the focus on is what would you do after this weekend to help actualize on these ideas and to execute on the idea? What do you need to broaden your team and get additional expertise in certain areas? Do you need to build a prototype? Do you need to do more customer discovery? Give us, again, more credibility that you have thought about these things in terms of how to take this from an idea to a prototype or to impact, essentially, or to being out there and affecting patients and others. And then the last part is the presentation. So how effective were you in delivering all of this content to the judging panel? Was it well communicated? Was it easy to understand? Did it hit on all of those three components? And then lastly is about also the diversity of the backgrounds of the team. Because it plays a key role in giving us a better sense of the credibility of the solutions that are being proposed. And so just a reminder that everybody did agree to a code of conduct in terms of the terms of the hackathon. This was what you agreed to when you signed up on through Eventbrite, as well as when you submitted your application. So please just be mindful of that, as well as the, as well as the same thing with photography and videos. There'll be different sessions throughout the weekend where we are recording just like this session, as we'll be doing during the final presentations. There may be screenshots being taken during throughout the Slack workspace as well. So, but continuing to participate, you are agreeing to this. If you do not agree with this usage, definitely email us, but please don't continue to attend this event. Of course, here's all our social media, so highly encourage you guys to tweet and to post about your experience both during the weekend and after the weekend, so that we can continue to spread awareness about what all of you guys are working on, and also helps us to better amplify what you guys are working on after this weekend as well. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to one of the teams that came out of the first Beat the Pandemic event back in April, Guillermo Simon, who will talk about both what he's developed and his team has developed out of that first hackathon a few months ago, and maybe share a little bit of his tips and advice about what you should get out of this weekend and how to really approach this.
Hey everyone, thank you Freddie, great presentation. Thanks for the organizing team for having me, really excited to be here. And thanks to everyone tuning in, welcome. My name is Guillermo. Like many of you, many months ago, I also found myself in a position like yours where I wanted to do my part against COVID. And the WePool team came together during the MIT COVID-19 challenge. And we were very fortunate to be one of the winners in Beat the Pandemic 1, and then later for Beat the Pandemic 2 as well. And so we've been working on this initiative nonstop. And I think that, this challenge has been a great accelerator in terms of our progress. Initially, when I was placed into a track for the COVID challenge, really what we focused on was the testing challenge and the diagnostic piece of what it entails. And I think that this really deserves no further explanation. It's really a serious threat. And in terms of shortages, this is especially compelling in low resource settings, like in a country like my own, El Salvador, and presumably in many areas of India. But we can just take a look at first world countries and first world powers who are seriously struggling with this idea. Let's go on to the next slide and take a look at the US, for example. I mean, the US is breaking records every day in terms of new infections, right? I think that at the time of this analysis, only about 6 to 8% of the entire population of the US had been tested for COVID. And when you compare it to the predicted proportion of a population that was going to become infected, which was around 50 to 60%, that is a ridiculous discrepancy in terms of testing and predicted infections, right? Many experts have said that in order to mitigate and track the spread of the disease, at least 30 million tests a week should be conducted. And many of our advisors tell me that it should be closer to 100 million tests a week. I'm an incoming MBA candidate at MIT, and MIT is doing, if I'm right, about 2 to 3 tests, a test every 2 or 3 days to students. So really, the number for repeated monitoring should be astronomical. And meanwhile, in the US, they're only doing less than 5 million tests every week. So because of that, what we're seeing is premature reopenings of the economy, and leaders are acting on incomplete and biased data. And so this is the problem that we really try to hone in on through the challenge. And if we can go on to the next slide, the solution that we came to was one that back in April was not really being discussed. And it's the topic of pooled testing. And pool testing is when you collect a sample from multiple subjects, and then you mix it into a single vial, and then you test them with a single test kit. There's countries like Germany and Israel who have been doing it specifically for COVID, but it's not a new idea. Pooling has been done for HIV, for malaria, and in the US, pooling is now being done for COVID as well. So let's take a look at a quick example. Let's say that 12 samples arrive at a lab. And then what's done is these samples get separated into 3 pools of 4 samples, and then they get tested with 3 test kits, right? So if the sample is negative, if the mix is negative, then that confirms that every sample in the pool was negative, and so all the subjects are cleared. But if the sample is positive, then you can test individually, as has been done traditionally. So let's move on and see the results. Go on to the next slide, please, Kushal. And so for the individual pool, they'll do individual testing to try and identify where the positive sample was. And so in this micro experiment, right, there was, if you had done individual testing, you would have done 12 individual tests. But with pool testing, you would have done 7 total tests. So that's a 42% increase in terms of the test kit savings. So go on to the next slide, and let's take a look at statewide. This would represent an incredible increase in testing capacity, right? But there is a problem with pool testing. So let's move on to the next slide. Pool testing is only good when the prevalence rate or the positivity rate isn't high, because when the positivity rate is high, then the expected probability of encountering a positive sample within a desirably negative pool is high. And so you end up, if the pools are failing, then you end up individually testing. And so this intended optimization becomes useless. Let's take a look at Florida, for example, in the next slide, right? Florida has been breaking records in terms of new infections, and the prevalence rate has been oscillating between 10% and 20% recently, right? And you know, pooling was given an emergency use authorization by the FDA for Quest Diagnostics, which is a huge laboratory doing COVID testing here in the US. But when they noticed that the prevalence rate in Florida was so high, they just said that they weren't going to do it because it was too prevalent and pooling would have become ineffective. So there's a definite missing link here, and this is what our team worked on. Let's move on to the next slide. So the missing link here is, how do we intelligently pool? And what our team started thinking about in the hackathon is using artificial intelligence to segment subjects and minimize the probability of encountering a positive sample within a desirably negative pool. So what if we could use socio-demographic and healthcare data to recognize patterns and try to predict which patients are going to be negative, and then we pool those. And for the ones that we think are going to be positive, then we can do individual testing for them. So let's move on to the next slide. Here's what we came up with. So we can use socio-demographic and health data to predict an individual sample's pretest probability for COVID. And then we can generate a pooling segmentation that doesn't sacrifice test sensitivity or specificity. And this can be used for any test type for which pooling is available. So for example, COVID-19 PCR, but also next generation sequencing, antibody, and even other infectious diseases. And what was really important is for our process to be implementable. So it wouldn't work if the laboratories or the hospitals didn't have the data needed to train the model. But we've since verified that many of the hospitals and laboratories do have the framework necessary in order to implement this. And so we started running our simulations, and let's move on to the next slide. We started running our simulations, and we noticed that we got access to a precision FDA synthetic data set to train our model and test it. And what we found was that, in effect, if you do pooling, as the prevalence rate rises, once you get past 20 to 25% positivity rate, it's pointless to do pooling. But with WePool's AI, you could enable pooling methodologies no matter the prevalence environment. And so at a prevalence rate of 15%, you could save up to 60% of test kits. And at the same time, if we look at the next graph, you're also enabling around a 300% increase in sample analysis capacity, right? So if we go to the next one, we'll see what would happen if LabCorp and Quest Diagnostics, which are two huge labs that are doing 150,000 tests every day, if they were to use a technology like this, they would be able to clear an additional 80 million subjects by the end of 2020. And so that's really the goal in facilitating testing through intelligent pooling. Let's move on to the next slide. So this is just a quick quote from MIT Technology Review. Back then, the idea for combining machine learning with pool testing was a novelty, but now it's being recognized as something that could really be game-changing in terms of reopening the economy and tracking the spread of the disease. And so in terms of the hackathon, if we move to the next, let's skip this one. Let's go to the next slide. In terms of what the progress looks like, back in April, we started at Beat the Pandemic 1 and really ideating this problem. And we were very fortunate to have been selected as a winner for Beat the Pandemic 1. And then we chose to participate in Beat the Pandemic 2 in June. And then we were very fortunate to win there also. And so I think that it was a very important decision for us as a team that, this was not just a school project. We really wanted to see this through and make this implementable. And so we started a dialogue with the Department of Veterans Affairs, with University of California, the Kaiser Permanente, which is a huge hospital network in California, and many others who have shown interest in our technology. And we're at a point now where the software that encompasses our model is already being developed and ready for a pilot deployment. Like I was saying, we're not a school project anymore, and we've recently incorporated, we've filed a provisional patent. And right now what we're really working on is trying to materialize partnerships to start using the model clinically, informing laboratories as a decision support software to really enable pool testing as a methodology. And so the next slide is just honing in on the point, on Freddie's point about the team. It's really, really, really important that you select a varied skill set within the team. I'm seeing a little glitch here in the screen, but it doesn't matter. I can just tell you about the expertise that we span. I consider myself the least technically skilled of my team. We have people with expertise in economics. We have we have MDs, we have data analysts, we have bioengineers. It's very important that we form a very diverse team in order to tackle this problem and be able to offer different perspectives. So again, I wish you the best of luck in this hackathon. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out via LinkedIn. If you have any questions, if you move on to the next slide, you'll see the contact info for WePool. If you've questions or interest in learning more about WePool, just feel free to reach out to us at any time. And again, I wish you the best of luck in the hackathon. I'll be available to answer any questions. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Guillermo. Hope everyone found that to be inspiring story. And really, as you can tell, those of us at MIT really have a vested interest to see all of these ideas come to fruition And we are trying to work with as many of our partners as possible to provide you with the access and the resources to continue with the development of these ideas so you can have a meaningful impact. Oops. All right. So we went through the sort of the broad scope of what's going to happen this weekend. Really wanted to cover some of the more logistical components of it now. So tonight is really about ideating around the problem space. So you'll be doing these problem pitches via Zoom by track. So each track will have a different Zoom rooms, and those details will be posted in your respective track channels. Please attend only your track's specific problem pitches. Team formation will happen by Slack. Join the channels that correspond to the problem pitches that were done, and then try to build teams of 5 to 7 people. So tomorrow we'll have a how to pitch session as well, and this will just help you kind of put the frameworks on how to effectively communicate what you're working on in that final presentation. Again, mentors will be starting coming in from, I believe, from 12:30 p.m. Indian time tomorrow on Saturday and all throughout the rest of Saturday into Sunday. So really you'll have opportunities also for practice pitching to the organizing team on Saturday evening and Sunday morning. And really, want every team to take advantage of both of those opportunities so that you can get that feedback and deliver a great presentation on Sunday. Again, another practice pitch session on Sunday morning, and of course, final presentations on Sunday afternoon. So for tonight, we just went through the introduction into the challenge and Hack 101. So next we'll actually be starting, let's see. So we'll be starting, actually this time is a little bit off, but actually it is, right. So it'll be starting at 10 p.m. Indian time, 12:30 p.m. Eastern time. So in about 15 minutes, we'll switch to problem pitching. So you can look in your Slack channel of your track to find the Zoom link. And after everyone's done with problem pitching, we'll then go into team formation. And so ensure that you have, by the way, we highly encourage that you should download Slack to your computers and to use the desktop application, because then you have access to more of the functionalities and features that Slack has to offer, like the video conference calling features and so on. Again, just a reminder, write down the pitch numbers that you like so you know what channels to go and connect with. Talk with as many other participants as possible. Don't form a team too fast. Really get a chance to hear and learn about all the potential people that might want to work with you. Form the teams around the problem and the unmet need. Team registration, again, due on Saturday. Build teams with very different backgrounds from yourself. Aim for a team of 5 to 7 people. And then the MIT organizing team can help facilitate. And if you can't find a team to work with, or you don't have enough people on your team, please contact your track leads and we can help you with that process. So if you have any questions throughout the entire weekend, please first refer to the participant guides. And we are constantly updating that document throughout the weekend. So check there first for answers to your questions. If it's not there, post a question in the Slack channel, questions for organizers, and tag the MIT team or the track leads so that we can make sure that we can get your questions addressed. So with that, thank you so much for everybody's time. And we'll give you about 12.5 minutes here to take a quick break, but please make your ways to Slack and to the Zoom channel for your respective tracks.